Good evening and welcome to Dessert and Dish. Dessert and Dish is our weekly interview segment where we invite real people to dish on the real blessings and challenges of living faithful lives. We always have dessert at Dessert and Dish because, in my experience anyway, dessert always makes good conversations that much better, and we all need a little reminder of the sweetness of the kingdom of God already at work in our midst. I'm really excited this week as we continue our Dessert and Dish series, introducing the new leaders of our church. I'm really excited to welcome Randy Williams and my co-host for the evening, Archdeacon Michael Patterson. We're going to tell you a little bit more about both Michael and Randy in a moment, but first things first, we have to hear about dessert, and Michael is the benefactor of our dessert tonight.
Yes.
So Michael, why don't you tell us what you brought and why?
Well, this is the dessert that I like to sin for. It is probably my favorite dessert. I was introduced to it a number of years ago, actually, when I was in Italy, of all places.
That's
Where
the
else?
right
It's
place
a
to
cannoli.
be.
It's a cannoli. And cannolis are a shell, like a clam shell that is deep fried and then treated with ricotta cheese. And it is absolutely magnificent. Some of the best cannolis in the world are actually in Boston.
In Boston?
In Boston.
Why would that be, I
Because
wonder?
there's a very, very intense Italian section of North Boston. And they actually have cannoli competitions.
Wow.
And there's one place, if you ever go to Boston, it's called Michael's Eatery.
Okay.
And they always have a lineup down the street for people who want to come and experience one of Michael's cannolis and an espresso in Little Italy in Boston.
Well, I feel like I need to go to Boston now.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
I mean, it's hard to imagine cannolis being better outside of Italy, but maybe like a close second.
Yeah, well, they really, truly are. And I just want to give a shout out to this establishment in Oakville. It's called Monastery Bakery, and it is become renowned. It's taken over an entire plaza, and it is so busy through the week that they actually have police officers directing.
No.
They do.
Police
Police
through the
officers
week?
directing traffic for people getting in and out of the parking lot.
Wow.
And
I mean,
and this is where these cannolis originated from. So I hope you enjoy them as much as I do.
well, I am very grateful to you for bringing these. And I do
Can we dig
remember, yeah,
great.
absolutely. I remember Monastery Bakery from when I used to live in Oakville, but they didn't have police officers back in my day.
Oh,
That was so good.
made
Thank
this
you.
afternoon.
Fresh. They definitely
Very.
taste fresh. Oh, wow. What a treat. Well, on that note, introducing our amazing dessert for the evening, I think we better do a little bit more of a deep dive into introducing the two of you. So, Randy, you are the second of the 4 new ordinands in the Diocese of Niagara that I get to talk with over these couple of weeks. And you have been in the process toward ordination in our church, along with our own Matt Gillard, who's here at St. George's, and Rob Duncan, who was here at St. George's. And the 4 of you, along with Rob Jones, who I talked with last week, are all going to be ordained deacons of our church on September 26th. So, you know, the day is fast approaching, isn't it? Yeah. And Michael is not new to Dessert and Dish, although the last time that we spoke, it was over Zoom because we were right in
Right.
the thick of lockdown living. And so this is your first time
Live.
here in person live for Dessert and Dish. Michael is the lead priest at Church of the Incarnation in Oakville, working with Randy. And Michael has served in a number of senior leadership roles in our church for quite a few years now.
Quite a few years.
Yeah, so you bring lots of different experiences to the table when we're talking. Now, Randy, I'm hoping that you can just kind of help us to set the stage for tonight's conversation by telling us a little bit about yourself, some of the broad brush strokes of where you're from and who are the significant people in your life, where you are now, and what you're doing right now.
Boy, lots of questions.
Yeah,
Thanks so much,
yeah.
Matthew. Really appreciate the invitation and the warm welcome. I'm really pleased to be here. And as you've already hinted, I'm really quite excited about
Nice.
the end of the month and what that means for me and the other ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm from Toronto, that big city to the east. So it was a little drive getting out here, but it
Yes.
was certainly worth the drive with Michael. And now we're spending this time here with you. The people who have been influential in my life have been my family members, starting from my grandparents, who worked very hard, and my parents, who instilled in us all that we should do our best. It was simply, there were no other expectations that they placed on us other than to do your best, whatever it was that was good and helpful. I was raised in a family where helping others was really, really, really important.
Yeah.
I just want to touch on the doing your best because it's important. It's important for me to recall the first time my parents said that to me as a young black boy. When even I felt that doing my best in the eyes of others, especially some of my teachers, wasn't good enough.
Wow.
And that wasn't good enough was not because I wasn't good enough. It was that they had different expectations for me. So those early years of challenge helped to form me in differing ways in that sense. And I'm so grateful. My parents didn't tell me, you can't do this, or avoid that, or, well, they did tell me the avoid story, which I'm
Right.
sure you've always all heard as I got older. If you're stopped by a police person, do that.
Oh my
This is the
gosh.
story
Wow.
that every black male gets from their parents. And I certainly had it earlier in my life. But I'm grateful for those steps and those warnings of love and compassion that my parents and my siblings all surrounded with me. So I'm the youngest in my family. No, not spoiled, but just the youngest. And I'm really grateful for the mentoring that my siblings have given me.
I mean, I think that's an amazing way of framing that sense of other people's imposed expectations. To be able to frame that with gratitude is pretty remarkable.
Yes.
I can certainly hear in what you're saying how much that has formed you. But you know, it certainly says a lot about your family, the people who shaped you, and you yourself, that
Yes.
you would read that through a lens of gratitude.
Absolutely. You asked two other questions, which I've forgotten, but you can remind me again.
Oh, just kind of the broad brushstrokes of where you are now. What keeps you occupied day to day right now?
Day and night. Where I am now, you've already mentioned, is Church of the Incarnation. That keeps me busy day
Yes.
and night.
And your role there. What is your official role there?
My official role is working with Michael and being mentored by Michael, who's an amazing person, as you know. And while I'm getting used to his sense of humor,
It seems like you might have like some sense of humor to bring to the table
Well,
too.
certainly
So
does. He
I'm
certainly
sensing
does,
a
yeah.
little bit of back and forth that goes on here.
I'm just so grateful to be at Church of the Incarnation. You know a little bit about us, and we'll talk
Yeah,
a
we're
wee
gonna
bit.
delve into that a bit.
It's the right place. I remember when I was placed and showed up there to chat with Michael and the office administrator and the music director after having conversations with them online. I remember a saying from my grandmother, excuse me, it's very simple, 'tis God. That's all she used to say. And when something worked favorably, and I got the sense immediately that this was the place.
Nice.
This was the place. It was There was no apprehension. The angst of meeting was immediately gone as they engaged me in conversation. And here it was. We were initially behind mask, and then we went and we sat outside. And it felt very much like these were not strangers to me.
Isn't that amazing?
It is
Yeah.
very amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm just very grateful for that.
So you and I have had many conversations about your call to ministry.
Yes.
And it would, I think, be really interesting because it's an extraordinary story for you to share with the folks and with Martha a little bit about that and how you really understood how God is, how you discerned God's call to ordained ministry.
Absolutely. I'm happy to share that story. I was born and baptized in the Anglican Church, and very much like many teenagers at the time, and perhaps now, left. I was bored with church,
Right.
bored with saying much of the same thing. It meant nothing to me. It did not engage me.
Right.
And I didn't leave church totally, but neither did my circle of friends. I was at the Anglican church in the morning, and in the afternoon, my parents, keeping a tight rein on us, sent us to the evangelical church in the afternoon.
Okay, interesting.
Pentecostal. We liked the music.
Yeah.
And in my later teenage years, I drifted more towards the evangelical church, which in many ways I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the teachings. I'm grateful for many aspects of that particular ministry. When I was a late teenager, my dad, who was deacon in the church, said to me, "Son," and I knew whenever he called me son, it was something very serious.
Right.
He says, "I think God's calling you to ministry. Do you understand what I'm saying?" And we sat and chatted. And to make a very long story short, later I also sensed that call to ministry. I knew something was going on.
Right.
I didn't quite know what it was. I transitioned from Anglican to Methodist,
Okay.
and from Methodist to a non-denominational church, and then a Pentecostal church. So my background is quite varied in what I bring
you've
back
had a
to
lot
Anglicanism.
of feet in different circles of the church. That's
Absolutely,
amazing.
and they were all wonderful learning experiences. But in each of those places, other people started to affirm and confirm that, "Randy, we think you have a call
Is that
to
right? Like,
ministry."
so in each
In
place?
every single place.
No way. That's
And I then
amazing.
started to realize that as I was moving, and I questioned myself in university, was I running? Was I really running because this is not, my dad reminded me of the joke when he said, "I think you should be a preacher," and you decided that you want to be a teacher instead. The two do cross over in that sense. So as mentioned, every single one of those denominations I went to, people affirmed and reaffirmed.
Goodness.
And no one could have, in my wildest dreams, said to me that I would end up back at the Anglican church where I was called. This is such an amazing thing to me.
Yeah.
Yet I definitely knew I was not called to those other places. And God moves in truly miraculous ways, open doors that I didn't think existed.
Yeah, right.
I call them accidental, but they were not accidental. I
Yeah.
truly look at it as this was God's directions in each step, both in my professional life as well as in my academic life, and how doors opened.
Wow, I love how you say like doors that you didn't even know existed. So it's not like you were even kind of standing at the door knocking.
No.
It was like, oh, there's a door there.
And somebody had already opened it.
Yeah, that is wild.
And that was the most amazing thing.
So you've just recently completed a career as a teacher, right? Which we've talked about the transition and what that's like quite often. Can you say a little bit about the way in which your career as a teacher has provided you the skill set or the capacity to move into ordained ministry? Is there a parallel between them? Are there things that you think will translate well for you, given your former career, into your new vocation?
Absolutely. I think my final word was, connection and doors opening. And God was at work both in my secular life and in my spiritual life.
God tends to do that, I
Yes.
find. God doesn't really go for being compartmentalized, I find, as much as we try.
So I went off to university, and my honors bachelor arts degree was in history
Okay.
and in religious studies. This was me not focusing on ministry at all.
Right, but
Okay, this just happened.
yeah.
My Bachelor of Ed was history again, and New Testament studies. So I'm getting closer, and both are history, by the way.
Yeah.
As well as guidance counseling in that sense. That foundation has prepared me amply, even before going on to ministry and getting my master's in research, in the sense that while the academics are important, it helps me to engage with young people who are also in education. I get it when oftentimes their parents say, I don't know what this kid is thinking. And there's an opportunity for me to carry those skills and chat with parents and guardians and grandparents, because that's what we're getting also, and aunts and uncles about where their children are in that sense. And that carries over to the church. The counseling component, as you can imagine, is vitally important. That all-important skill of listening, not just hearing, but listening to what people are saying and being able to respond and or journey with them according to what their concern is. So those skills just transfer right in. History also was a great foundation for me when it came to seminary work.
Yeah. What about the leadership skills in terms of
Yeah,
as a
that's so good.
teacher and now in the church? What are the skills the leadership skills that may be similar and may be different between?
Well, the most important one is communication. And again, that's an extension of the counseling, being able to listen to differing stories and realize that while I may be the person in front of the class, every single one of those students / parishioners have stories and can contribute to my leadership skills in that sense.
That is so important.
So communicating, listening, absolutely. Being able to know when to lead and when to be led.
Yeah.
And
Like when to lift up the voices of others, like that
Absolutely.
two-way street that that teaching and ministry has to be like.
And empowering. It's all about empowering in that sense. Bringing out the skills that people and / students may not even recognize they have.
Yeah, totally. It's there are a couple of interesting things to me in what you just said. On a personal note, my parents were both in education,
Great.
and the number of times over the years that my dad has said to me, like, I know it's not exactly the same, but let me just offer you some reflections out of like my experience as a teacher. And he was eventually a high school principal, and just, so many times he's been a sounding board to me in terms of those leadership skills and how you build a team and how you create that sense of a shared vision with a team. But then the other thing that I just kind of want to note in what you're sharing, I think like there's maybe a temptation to say, okay, well, all of these different communities like affirmed your calling to ministry and you went and did something else. But what I'm hearing in your story is how much everything that you have been doing is part and parcel of how you're now going to be a leader in the church.
Absolutely.
Like, it doesn't sound to me like a running away story. It sounds to me like a God was leading you here all the time, right?
I didn't see it as that.
Yeah.
I just, until when I look at the big picture, I'm thinking, all of these blocks,
Yeah.
I didn't notice, were already falling into place.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was just sort of a slide in, as I guess that's what this is for me now, in the transitioning, that once my time had come and I knew that God's call was definite and it was time to, I don't say I'm leaving teaching.
Right.
I
yeah.
may be leaving the field of education,
Yeah.
but ministry has so many amazing opportunities for teaching.
Yeah. Yeah. Like all of those pieces of what you've been doing in a very secular institution, you're totally bringing into this work now.
What I neglected to tell you was that I changed boards and schools, and at some stage, and this is a really huge piece of the puzzle, I taught at an Anglican school.
Oh, so is that part of how we got you back?
Yeah. I had no interest, and an opportunity arose which I refused for almost 2 years.
Is that right?
And then moved over, and it was the chaplain at the school. I would, during lunch hour, go into the chapel and just sort of sit quietly. And the turmoil was going on. And one of the questions I was asking myself was, what am I doing here?
Right.
And the chaplain came and we started to chat. And he sowed the seeds
Yeah.
to me answering what would be my call.
Well, it sounds like there were a lot of seeds over the
Yes,
years,
there were.
but like those sound like some pretty important full circle seeds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Wow, what a remarkable story. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about Church of the Incarnation, where you both serve. I think it's fair to say that Church of the Incarnation has a really good reputation across this part of the church as being a community that has been really intentional about serving where you're planted, right? Like getting to know the needs of the people around you, doing that discerning, listening work, and developing your ministry accordingly. So I would love to hear about how you're feeling energized in your work at Incarnation, and where you see these connections happening, what gets you fired up about ministry specifically at Incarnation, and what's kind of your dream going forward in terms of what this church can be and your role in the church can be.
Okay, I think I can answer half of those.
Yeah, well, I'm just
What I
throwing,
recall,
you
yeah.
don't have to answer like everything. I'm just throwing lots of things out there.
Okay.
Like, yeah, tell me about your experience of Incarnation, and then how you see yourself joining in what they're doing.
Sure. I'm often looking for difference and what engages people. And never have I been in a church that was rebranding. And when I arrived online, Incarnation was finishing a particular component of its branding.
Okay.
And with that branding came the slogan, motto, belief.
Hashtag.
Absolutely. You do not have to believe to belong.
Okay.
I'll say that again because
Yeah, say it again.
you really have to grasp it. And I'm saying to those of you who are listening beyond this space, in any church, that should be the saying. You do not need to have to believe to belong. I mentioned about each of us coming with a story. And our stories are all very varied. It's impossible for us to be all at the same stage.
Yeah.
And for us not to engage people who have questions, concerns, disagreements
Yeah.
in faith, then why are we here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are we here? And that's an important step and stepping stone, foundation for me, for missional work. Engaging people not where I expect them to be, not where we expect them, not where we want them to be, but exactly where they are in their comfort zone and journeying with them.
Yeah.
And beyond that, the church has had a strong community presence in the past. And again, I'm relatively new there, but I do know that over the past few years, they have been engaged with weekly barbecues, engaging people in the community to come out and find out what the parish is about. We are continuing in differing aspects our outreach in the sense of our community gardens, which I
Okay.
think, Michael, we've had for how many years?
4 years.
4 years. So I'm a gardener, and I love to see things grow. But my garden has never reached the potential of Inca's gardens.
Right.
And we have an amazing vegetable gardening team, and the vegetables just grow. We don't keep them. They're given to the food bank.
Beautiful.
And, in fact, to people who walk by and who need stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they know there are no fences around it. We just trust in
Yeah.
that sense. Those are two areas that, we focus on, but we are always working at new areas. Of course, like any other church, any other parish, the pandemic has sort of kept us in, but it's also been an amazing time for us to dream and re-image and rework what we can do and look at possibilities online, and people who may have accidentally tuned into us on a Sunday morning and heard our message of hope and welcome and hospitality to them. So we are also reaching out to community organizations in Halton and in Oakville specifically to build relationship.
Yeah.
And those relationships are across every boundary of diversity.
That's beautiful. I guess just like a couple of things I want to pick up on there. It seems to me that whole piece around you don't have to believe to belong. I think in a lot of ways that exemplifies that two-way street that I kind of mentioned before, and that I hear so much in your teaching ministry, and that I've seen very much in your leadership as well, Michael, which is like there's a responsibility on us as leaders as well if we're going to say something like that, right? Because we have to become very aware of what our expectations are,
Absolutely.
and then being willing to let those go, right? And so many of them are not based in anything other than just assumptions that we're making, right? So there's such an intentionality about that kind of welcome, to be willing to really examine kind of our own values, attitudes, and assumptions, and to be extremely open about letting those go and meeting somebody where they are, right?
I just want to add to to
Yeah.
that a bit, because there's a second part to that.
Okay.
That's important, I think, that is we let go of the assumptions, and we also do not assume that we can do anything about someone's relationship, direct and personal relationship with God. We can walk with them, we can offer them guidance and support and education and all these kinds of things. And we say along the lines that if the Holy Spirit offers you the gift of faith in your
Yes.
journey of life, we celebrate that collectively as the body
Yeah.
that we call church. And so it's an organic kind of process. And the people who tend to gravitate to us are people who have been given permission to doubt and to question
Yeah, yeah.
and so on. So
Well, and it seems to me when you say that, like it really is a three-way street, right? Because what you're doing in that is trusting God.
yeah, totally.
Like you're
Absolutely.
trusting
Absolutely.
God to show up.
It's not about us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think so much of what we do in a community of faith is we try to find language for experiences that we should assume are happening. Like
Yeah.
and it's up to people what kind of language they connect with and want to use. But
And oftentimes that language can be confusing to people
yeah.
and turn them off.
Well, and that goes back to kind of the assumptions and so on. It's very easy to assume, somebody who mostly, by and large, grew up in the Anglican Church, grew up in the Anglican Church, grew up in the Anglican Church. It's easy to assume that language that means something to me would also mean something to another person, and you've got to hold that pretty loosely too.
Yes.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to pick up on and what you just said is the COVID piece.
Yes.
Because we've all been on, a pretty significant learning curve, right?
Vertical.
Yeah, vertical learning
Yeah.
curve. I think it was before we started the camera rolling, but you kind of noted last Sunday was like your first opportunity to be in person with this
Yeah.
congregation that you've been serving in for the past how many months, right? Like,
Yes.
and you're just getting a chance to meet them. So, what have you been learning? Apart from everything, what are some specifics that you've been learning about the church during COVID? What do you think we need to be really paying attention to and making sure that we bring forward if and when we ever come out of this pandemic?
One thing I know for sure, and Michael has said this repeatedly, there is no turning back now.
Right, yeah. Yeah, like there's no going back to normal.
No.
Yeah.
And that includes our method of delivery, of ministry. We're out there. The world is our oyster, and they are looking at us, and they are learning from us. And we are leading, and they're hoping to be with us, we hope, at some stage. That is the first and foremost thing, I think, and how we share ministry.
Right.
Because that also peels back, if I may use an analogy, the onion with so many opportunities that I may have a few, you may have a few.
Mm-hmm.
None of us have all of the opportunities. So at Incarnation, like any other church, we recognize the God-given gifts of other people and what they bring.
Yeah.
And how they can help us to get this ministry out. And in helping us get the ministry out, helping themselves also.
Yeah.
As we reach out to help others in that sense.
Yeah, so those partnerships,
Yeah.
sense of mutuality.
Doing things differently.
Doing things
And-
differently.
and
Technology.
Yes,
Technology.
because of that technology. And for most of us, certainly myself included, doing things differently is not always easy. It's a real challenge, and sometimes we offer resistance, and we don't even know we're resisting. And
Yeah.
until we have an aha moment, and that aha moment opens up just a whole wealth of information for us.
Yeah, that is very, very true.
But we've got to be open.
Yeah, well, and that builds so much on kind of the hashtag, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what is, you okay there?
I'm
Got it?
losing my little Madonna mic here.
Your little Madonna, Mike.
Are you, so what's life going to look like after September 26th? What's going to feel like for you?
It will feel as if I'm continuing on this amazing journy, because I'm not quite there yet, but I'm almost there.
Well, I don't know whether you ever get to
Well,
arrive,
at
right?
least
Michael,
name.
have you arrived
At
yet?
least the name. At least the
Okay.
name.
Okay.
I am experiencing, and I expect that after the 26th, I will continue to experience a variety of emotions. I realize that with this step, this response to that particular call, comes a great, grave amount of responsibility. And that responsibility is not to be taken lightly. While I've always considered or aimed to be an example of Christ in our world, I realize that this ups the ante. And again, that's not to be taken lightly either.
Yeah, so you're going into the 26th with that sense of the weight of it, I hear.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also the joy,
Yeah.
the expectation, and the
Grace.
Yeah, yes,
There's so
yes.
much grace in everything that you've shared tonight. So I hope that grace lifts you, even as the weight of the responsibility also is with you.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Minus a couple days. Who's counting?
Have you worn your clergy collar yet?
I put the tab on to take a photo, and I've taken it off.
What did that feel like?
I paused.
Yeah.
I paused, and I held it, and slowly sort of slipped it in, and had a little conversation with myself, a personal conversation with myself about what this means. And Michael, you've spoken to me about your experience with the color and what that means.
Yeah.
And I heard that very clearly.
Something I just think we don't talk a lot about, and I call it the theology of the collar,
Yeah.
and what that represents. And when we put it on, why are we putting it on?
Yes.
Do we say a prayer before we put it on, or do we take it for granted? And for what purpose are we putting it on?
And how do people see us?
And how do we feel internally?
Yes.
How does the Spirit touch us internally? And how are we being perceived externally?
Absolutely.
And that there's a shift that occurs in both cases, I think, both internally and externally, that we need to be conscious of
Yeah.
and pay attention to. And to your point, it is an immense privilege and an immense responsibility, and the biggest gift we can be given by God.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I like the naming of that, Michael, and you're right, we don't talk about it nearly enough. Yeah, because it is, it does change so much in terms of how you move through the world and how people, the kinds of assumptions and ideas that people are focusing on you as you're moving through the world. So, yeah, a lot of reflection.
You're no longer neutral,
Right, yeah.
right? You're no longer neutral. It's
Yeah,
not like you're just
that's-
walking by someone on the street. That there's people pay attention
Yeah.
either way.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think it is different for men than for women. I
Sure.
think that there are a bunch of other layers of the story that
Sure.
that go along with seeing a man wearing a clergy collar. Sometimes when I wear a clergy collar, people think I'm dressing up for Halloween,
Oh, dear.
right?
Dear.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we're making a really odd fashion choice. So, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it is a
Wow.
different thing for women. Not quite as clear a signifier. And I think that clear signifier is also shifting in some ways for men as well, as our culture becomes increasingly secular.
Right. Yeah.
There are lots of people out there who don't know what it means anymore. So
Yeah.
interesting. So I want to ask this of all of the ordinands. I just think about my own ordination to the diaconate and to the priesthood, and both times there were people that I was carrying very close, and some of them were there in person, in the flesh, and some of them were there in spirit. And, some of them were family members, but there were also just examples that I really wanted to keep very, very intentionally close to me going into this next chapter, like just characteristics and models that I didn't want to lose track of as I kind of embraced the weight and the grace of what was before me. So I'm wondering who you're going to be carrying close on September the 26th.
I think that I will be carrying not just one person, but
Yeah.
my grandparents and my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dad's been speaking a lot. And I know that he would certainly be very happy.
Wow. That's really beautiful, and I love that you kind of started by talking about them, and
Yes.
another full circle here. Yeah. Well, I hope that some of us will be there in person on September the 26th, which will be a real joy and privilege. I hope that people across our church are going to tune in and join us in the fellowship of the Holy Spirit on September the 26th.
I don't think you knew, or maybe you do, that Martha's preaching at your ordination.
I am.
Did you know that?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
This is my reconnaissance mission, actually.
Oh.
Just gathering material for my
okay.
sermon.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so I
Wonderful.
will be there in person on September the 26th. I assume you're going to
Yeah.
be there in
Yes.
person. But everybody's going to have an opportunity to tune in, and even if you can't join in on that afternoon, I trust that you'll be held in prayer by our entire church going
Absolutely.
into September the 26th. And you're going to be such a blessing to our whole church. We aren't going to have you here at St. George's on staff, but I know that the conversation and leadership that takes place across our church is a blessing to all of us in our individual parishes, and it's going to be such a joy and privilege to welcome you into the collegiality with all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for your prayers, your continued prayers going
Thank
forward.
you, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
So thank you to Randy. Thank you to my co-host, Michael. Thank you to Lindsay, who is running the tech for us tonight. You don't get to see her, but she's our unsung hero. Thank you, Lindsay. And next week, our series introducing you to the new leaders of the church wraps up. Next week, I get to talk to Matt Gillard, who serves here at St. George's, as well as Rob Duncan, who has been a parishioner here at St. George's and is now serving in Niagara Falls. So they're going to be my guests next week. And thank you all out there for joining with us tonight and being part of how together we get to eat and talk and participate in the sweetness of life. Good night, everyone.
Good night.